All right, well, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for coming to this workshop in our segment 3 of our workshop series. Today, we're talking about navigating produce safety regulations for urban small growing spaces. We're being joined by Crystal Forman and her partner, and bear with me, I just lost both bios. Kimberly Raikes, and this is our 2:30 session. So I hope you enjoy this session. I'm looking forward to it. It's always good to learn how to navigate regulations. My name is Sister Anna Muhammad. I'm the Food Access Director for NOFA Mass. I'm based in Springfield, but I work throughout the state. We just have a few opening comments before this workshop starts, and then we'll give it over to Kimberly and to Crystal. Okay, so you've probably seen this slide in a couple of workshops already. We are presenting this conference on land that was inhabited by the Nipmuc people prior to European colonization. As we work to heal the destruction caused by colonization, we appreciate your support, our participants, solidarity, and continued learning. If you'd like to learn more and honor those whose land you now steward or live on or farm, you can use this website that you see on the screen to look up the indigenous family that's in your area where you live. So NOFA Mass has a commitment, and it's developing a good commitment for racial equity in the food system. We recognize that our agricultural system is built on stolen land and the forced labor and exploitation of stolen Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. Our conference aims to help to address this harm and bring equity to the food system. And hopefully some of you had a chance to join our two caucuses, the BIPOC caucus and the White Ally caucus. Look for more information to come out of those two. They were great sessions today. Also in our work, we ask our participants, our allies, our partners to practice racial equity in your own community. And you can do that in a couple of ways. One, support legislation to advance the work toward reparations, protect the rights of farm and food workers, and support BIPOC-led organizations through sharing land, money, equipment, and connections. We have some examples of BIPOC-led organizations that you can assist in your communities. Look for similar organizations that you can provide resources to. So we cannot have this conference without our wonderful, wonderful sponsors that support us. And so on the screen now, you see our partner level sponsors. We're very grateful to them for their continued support. And now you're seeing our supporter level sponsors. They also provide a great deal of support to NOFA Mass. Please check them out. If you see them in the vending area, stop by, see what they have. And so with no more on NOFA, I want to take this opportunity to quickly share with you our wonderful presenters who will be with us today. So first, we have Crystal Forman. She is owner and educator, holistic wellness and health out of Baltimore, Maryland. Crystal, you didn't tell me you're from Baltimore. That's where I used to live. Crystal is a master's of public health, is a passionate health and wellness educator and founder of Holistic Wellness and Health, where they make healthy living easy, nutritious, delicious, and fun. Fun is the key word there. With the focus on plant-based foods and meditation to help you live a healthier, compassionate, and more vibrant life. That is Crystal Forman. And then her co-presenter, Kimberly Raikes. Her background stems from her family's farm in Fort Mitchell, Virginia. After being a stay-at-home mom for 17 years and working for the Board of Election, she returned to agriculture. After completing the Master Gardener certification from the University of Maryland Extension, she then completed the Weed Warrior and Tree Keeper courses at Baltimore Recreation and Parks, as well as the Future Harvest Beginning Farmer Training Program. So it really gives me honor to bring to you all today, Crystal and Kimberly. They are broadcasting live. And Crystal, where are you coming from today?
So we're in College Park, Maryland at the Future Harvest Conference.
All right.
Yeah. Can you see our screen?
I will as soon as I stop sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just making sure.
Oh, that's okay. This one is a little slow today, so. Okay, there you go, Kristen.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much for introducing us. So we're going to go and get started, but before that, I just want to say the following is for informational purposes only and is not intended as legal advice. Go. So why food safety and why now? So just as recently as a few weeks ago, we've had an outbreak of salmonella with alfalfa sprouts. And with this outbreak, we had 15 illnesses, 2 hospitalizations, and 3 states were affected. There was a recall. Luckily, no one passed away from this. But it's very important when we think about food safety that everything is basically seen holistically for like whatever happens in one state affects all of us. So when something happens with alfalfa sprouts or romaine lettuce or spinach, it affects all of us, whether you're a large farm or a small farm, and Kimberly will talk about that a little more later. And the 3 states affected were South Dakota, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. And it was just very recently that this happened, but it definitely caused a stir. A lot of people are now afraid to eat sprouts. Does anyone, and you could put either a thumbs up if you're virtual or in the room, we can see you all as well. Does anyone remember the cantaloupe outbreak? So I asked this earlier, not everybody, okay, awesome, we got a couple, okay, awesome, great. Okay, so in 2011, the United States saw an outbreak of listeriosis in cantaloupes from Colorado that lasted from July to September. 30 people died, making it the 2nd deadliest recorded US outbreak since the CDC began tracing outbreaks in the 1970s. In June 2011, 20 people fell ill from eating cantaloupe from Del Monte fresh produce infected with salmonella, and that produce is actually from Guatemala. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have found that 8 of the people sickened had eaten cantaloupes purchased from a Costco, and they used the purchase records to figure out that that was the food that was in common. So Del Monte went to court to lift the import ban. There was a ban on bringing in produce. It just caused a whole lot of issues in general. Sorry. And it turns out that from the investigation, they found that it was a pipe carrying raw sewage that emptied into an open ditch about 110 yards from the farm's packing house. Excuse me, thank you. So there's a lot of data on foodborne outbreaks, and statistics show that the number of illnesses caused each year by fruits and vegetables is greater than any other type of food. And this surprises a lot of people because what is more nourishing than fruits and veggies? But in the United States, the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, estimates that approximately 48 million foodborne illnesses occur each year. And many of these only cause minor symptoms that pass quickly. However, severe cases result in approximately 128,000 hospitalizations and approximately 3,000 deaths each year. Many of the cases of foodborne illnesses are related to food handling and preparation, practices in restaurants and home kitchens. However, highly publicized multi-state outbreaks have been linked to contamination that occurred on farms, in packing houses, and in processing plants that distributed products over great distances. So why is produce a risky food? So like I said earlier, we think of produce as being healthy and shouldn't be an issue. But the main reason is that produce is now eaten raw more frequently, and there's no kill step of preserving or killing. So there's more risk there. There's also more steps in the distribution process. So a lot of more produce is moving longer distances and has more opportunity as it passes many hands to become risky. Pathogens are equal opportunity offenders. They don't care if your farm is organic or aeroponic. Covered produce includes, but is not limited to, all of the following fruits, vegetables, and nuts like almonds, walnuts, apples, brassicas, citrus fruits, stone fruits, herbs, garlic, rhubarb, onions, tomatoes, like melons, a lot more. So just want to make sure you know what type of produce you're growing, and we'll get into that in a little bit to let you know exactly what you have to be cautious of. So it's important to know that the FSMA regulations only apply to commercially grown, packed, and processed food or feed. Home gardeners or home food preservers are not covered under the law, but it's still good to know the food safety and produce safety. Some types of produce crops and food products are also not covered, so they do not fall under these regulations. And those would include things like white potatoes and asparagus. Those are usually cooked, so they're not covered under the law. So if you only grow asparagus or you only grow potatoes, you don't have to worry about the law, but it's still good to follow these procedures. So this includes grocery stores, so first direct to consumer sales at restaurants and retail establishments. This includes grocery stores, farmers markets, farm stands, and internet food sales. However, they may be covered under other state and local regulations. Also, FSMA regulations only apply to FDA regulated foods, not the USDA regulated meat and poultry products. If your operation is already covered under FDA food safety rules like the juice HACCP or the seafood HACCP, your products are not covered under all aspects of the law. Sorry. Thank you. You will need to check to make sure which parts of the law you fall under so that you know whether or not you're excluded. And most businesses that produce food and small businesses as well are regulated by the FDA. So you just need to know what you fall under, and we'll go into that a little more. Okay, so the FDA Food Safety Monetization Act of 2011 directs the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, as the food regulatory agency of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to better protect public health, but among other things, adopting a modern, preventive, and risk-based approach to food safety. So as a key element of the preventive approach to better protect public health, the FDA published in the Federal Register the final rule entitled, and it's a long title, Standards for the Growing, Harvesting, Packing, and Holding of Produce for Human Consumption, also known as the Produce Safety Rule. You also see it as PSR. The Produce Safety Rule establishes for the first time science-based minimum standards for the safe growing, harvesting, packing, and holding of fruits and vegetables grown for human consumption. And the regulations are found in Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 112. You also see it as 21 CFR Part 112. This rule became effective January 2016, but the compliance dates are staggered, as you'll see later in the presentation. Right. So other FSMA regulations that may apply, including preventive controls for human food rule and the Sanitary Food Transport Act. We won't focus on the Sanitary Food Transport Act for this, but we will determine whether you have to follow FSMA for the produce safety rule or the preventive controls for human food rules, or both. Okay, so are you affected? So these are some of the questions you can ask to see whether or not you're actually affected by the FSMA rule. So one of the reasons why we have this, people were seeing family and friends getting sick. So the FSMA helps consumers have more faith in the food system. And just to let you all know earlier, I know I brought up 30 people died with the cantaloupe incident, but from 1996 to 2014, 68 people died from food-borne illnesses, mostly bacteria, and that was, all of them were preventable. In a couple of slides, we'll go over a more detailed flow chart, but for this one, you can just look at the basic questions here. Do you grow or pack or hold produce? If the answer is no, you're not covered by the rule. You don't have to worry about anything. If you are growing only for personal consumption, and it's like you're just growing for your family, your friends, you don't have to worry about the produce safety rule. However, if you are selling it, then you need to then go and determine like some other questions you have to ask about how much like you're selling. And even though it says like, do you sell 25,000 per year? And that's over an average of 3 years, that can actually, like it doesn't just include what you're selling like to make money, but the amount of produce. So if you're giving away $30,000 worth of produce every year, you're still required to follow the produce safety rule, even though you're not actually making money. And that's more because of the quantity of what's being sold. So we'll go into a little more detail in another slide. But the FSMA is the law. So this is not something that is, you can decide if you want to follow. You are covered and you have to comply if you gross over $25,000 a year in produce sales, and the produce is often eaten raw. And if you sell more than 50% to like different markets. If you do have all of those, it's likely that you will have to comply. So next slide. Thank you. So preventive controls rule. So that requires an operating and implemented food safety plan for any and every processing and packing facility. So the food safety rule includes an analysis of hazards and risk-based avertable measures which decrease or avoid risks identified during on-site risk assessments. So if you selected, I only grow produce that is rarely eaten raw, then none of the produce you grow is covered under the produce safety rule. That's pretty simple. So this rule only covers produce that is likely to be eaten raw, but if you said yes, at least some produce I grow is on FDA's list of produce likely to be eaten raw, then those produce crops could be covered under the produce safety rule. But to find out, you need to go to the next set of standards and choose which one is true about your farm. My average produce sales are less than $25,000 on average, or my average produce annual sales are at least $25,000. So the amount of your annual produce sales is the average value of your produce sales taken over the last 3 years. And the dollar amount will be raised each year based on the rate of inflation. So actually it hasn't raised in the past few years, even with inflation, but you just want to keep an eye on that if it does increase. So if your average annual produce sales are less than $25,000, then none of your produce is covered under the produce safety rule. Congress wrote this limit on produce sales in the Food Safety Modernization Act to protect very small farming operations from burdensome regulations. So what if your average annual produce sales are at least $25,000? If that's the case, then at least some of the produce you grow is covered under the produce safety rule. So before we move on to the next category of business activities, let's retrace our road back to the top of the flow chart. If your business is a farm, you have one more possibility to follow, and that is processed food on the farm. So that means that some type of value-added commercial food processing activities occur on your farm. So again, processing food for personal use doesn't count. So the specific definition of food processing, according to the FDA, is when you transform your food from basically what it was, and that can involve anything from just cutting an apple or shredding carrots and selling that to, packaging or canning or anything like that, or making hot sauce. All of those things will be covered. There we go. Okay, so also note that processing facilities are required under law. Okay, so if you do freeze any of your products for sale, like I said, that would be for the produce or processing facility. If you do not do any of these activities on your farm, any processed food products that you then sell are covered under the preventable controls for human food rule. So that's that's one in that salmon, pinkish, orange color at the bottom. So that means, so if you do any of these activities on your farm, any processed foods that you sell are covered. So you can be covered by both. So that means you can be covered by both rules. So let's go back up and over to the next box on the flow chart where it says I process food. That means your business is a food processing facility. If you process foods, no matter if it's on a farm or a standalone business, then you are covered under the preventive controls for food rule. So you may qualify for some exemptions, but that would require seeing if you are eligible for any of these. Also note that all food processing facilities were required under federal law to register with the FDA. So if you did this, you are covered under the preventive controls for human food rule. If you have not registered your food processing facility yet, you should call the FDA and visit their website immediately. Okay, we're almost done with our coverage decisions, but there is one more set of decisions to go over. So let's go back up and over to the box that says, I pack fresh produce at a location that is not a farm. Before you proceed, it's important to understand that if you pack produce on your farm, you fall into this first category and you're only covered by the produce safety rule. But if you conduct packing activities at a location that is not on your farm, you need to move down to the next set of choices. Again, you have two statements to choose from. The first statement is more than 50% of the produce I pack is grown on a farm or farms under a different ownership than my packing house. If this is true, then you're packing. So if this is true, you need to make sure. Okay, if this is true, then FDA says that your packing activities are covered under the produce safety rule. If you're unsure of anything, go back to the beginning and go through it again. Sometimes you have to go through this chart a few times to see exactly where you fall. And even if you determine your produce or products are not covered, if you sell them to a commercial buyers, the buyer may require that you provide evidence of good food safety practices. And that could mean meeting the food safety standards in the produce safety rule or the preventive controls for human food. So be sure to ask your buyers what they require.
Okay, we're going to go over the differences between GAP, which is Good Agricultural Practices Certification, and Produce Safety Rules, which you'll also see in our demonstration as PSR. You'll notice at the top, it definitely says that it requires a manager to be trained in food safety for GAP. With Produce Safety Rules, it requires the manager to attend a Produce Safety Alliance grower trainer class. There's a slight difference with that. Remember, you need to get your produce safety training for GAP will come straight from your USDA. With Produce Safety Alliance, you have multiple opportunities to take that grower training class. And again, the manager needs to attend, and it should always make sure that your workers are trained. The next section you see on both sides is the same, workers to be trained. No matter what it is that you as a manager are learning, you always need to make sure that you're training your workers. You'll hear us talk about this a little bit, a whole lot throughout this entire series, but make sure that your folks are trained, and whatever training that you receive, you need to make sure that it's something that the rest of your crew will be able to understand and relate to. They both have water testing, but you will notice that the water testing is a little bit more complex for produce safety rules. But as you see, it says that it is under review. A lot of the things that are coming down the pike in reference to our produce safety rules are constantly being changed. We've had some recent updates. So a lot of folks say that we are a moving target. That's only because things are coming down the pike, and as they come down, we have to shift and change and be in accordance to not only function under those new guidelines, but also share them. The next statement, as it says, requires GAP policies, standard operating procedures, which you'll hear us also relate to as SOPs, and record keeping, which is more rigorous than the PSR. The PSR requires similar GAP system and standard operating procedures, but less record keeping than the GAP certification. That does not eliminate the fact that you shouldn't be keeping very good records. It just has a slightly different procedure and record keeping style. GAP certification does require a food safety plan. Produce safety rule doesn't require a food safety plan, but we recommend that you do. Just in anything that you put in your place that you want to do. If you don't have a plan, then you're basically planning to fail. With the GAP certification, it does require a third-party audit. And with the PSR, there will be a Department of Ag inspection. So a third-party audit, we'll talk about that in the next slide, but that means someone else comes to your farm and takes the audit position and actually does the inspection on your farm, which is an audit when it's GAP, and they make the decisions of what needs to be changed and how you need to do things. And then you have a guideline that you're supposed to follow, as well as a follow-up to make sure that those things have been done. Now with GAP certification, you'll see it is industry driven. That basically means what is it that you plan, who is it that you plan on selling to, and who are your buyers? It is a business decision for you as a farm owner. It is not required by law that for the produce safety rule that you have the GAP certification or anything, but with produce safety, it is required by law. So you don't have to have an auditor and all those things don't come to you, but it is required by law to follow the produce safety rules. Which standard should I certify to? Now you'll see there are many choices that you have here. The main thing I'm going to say is ask someone for help. If you are starting a farm or if you've been in the business, you have friends, you have other folks who are also doing the same type of work or similar work. If you have an extensions agent, please talk with them. If you have other friends who are farmers, and also get with any ag consultants. The USDA has a lot of folks to offer for any assistance that you need. NRCS has folks that can help you and guide you and assist you in the right directions for when you are trying to get certified and who you should deal with. And remember, all of these are your choices. You are not obligated to go under any specific organization. You have the right to choose for yourself and make sure that it's someone that you're not someone, but a company that you're comfortable with. Which auditor should I use? There are many choices, as you can see here again. We always say ask for help. You always have your extension agent. And if you are sitting in a room and you don't know what an extension agent is and you've never heard of this, please touch base with someone there at the MASS conference and see how you get connected with your extensions agent. I know we have quite a few agencies and extension agents here in Maryland, but I'm not familiar with outside of the state of Maryland, how many or how connected you are, but usually we have one in each county. Get with your experienced farmers. If you don't know any, find some. Find someone who is doing similar work, go to a workshop, get yourself involved with activities in farming so that you can connect with someone who can also be your savvy friend farmer that can help you with different decisions on your farm. And always, consultants are wonderful to have. They help you figure out anything that you have, and even when you've had a rough day on the farm, to be able to talk with your consultant and just share the things that have happened, it helps out a great amount. Okay, GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative. It is a benchmarking system. It was established as a baseline for the equivalence between the audit programs. Some buyers require Global Food Safety Initiative benchmark GAP programs. If your buyer is requiring this, then of course you need to, one, take it very seriously and get in contact with your extension agent or someone close to you who can assist you through this. Now with the Global Food Safety Initiative, remember it is simply a benchmarking system. So when you hear someone say that they are certified GFSI, it doesn't mean that they have gone through this is not a certifying body. It is an industry partnership that provides assurance that a food safety standards and audit programs meet the baseline criteria. So be aware when you're talking to folks and they give you certain information about GFSI and being certified, it means that they want you to be certified by one of the several audit programs that meet the GFSI standards. If my customers require GAP certification, what should I do? Start by taking this request very seriously. Successfully incorporating any new system is so much about your attitude. Even if some of the requirements seem counterintuitive or ambiguous, and some do, ultimately you do want to make someone, you don't want to make someone sick or for obvious reasons. If you want everyone to take responsibility for food safety in your operation, then it starts with the boss. If you are agitated and unreceptive to the request that is coming down, then so is the rest of your team. It spreads to everyone. So attend the FDA approved Produce Safety Alliance Produce Rule Growers Training. Even if you are exempt, you should still know what's happening as you progress in your business. In most states, it is replacing the regular GAP food safety training, and it's pretty much fulfills that purpose. It helps you to understand whether or not, you must comply with the regulations. You will hear some folks tell you that you need to be aware of different things with produce safety. Everyone involved in your operation should know and understand the food safety rules, not just the manager or the farm, the owner, everyone within your operation. We do all we can to prevent microbial contamination of fresh produce. So that is not necessary to take corrective action after a product has left our fields or our packing house. We always want to make sure that before anything goes anywhere, that you have taken all the necessary precautions on your farm. And if you're training everyone and giving everyone the same information and making sure that they have all of the tools and resources that they need and know where everything is, then everything should be fine and nothing will ever leave your farm and hit the field and have to come back to you. And we'll talk about traceability in just a little while. What should I do? On your farm, you should always, as I said, train your personnel. Everyone should know everything that the farm manager knows about running the farm, knowing where the your safety equipment and your first aid kit is, and it should always be visible. Develop standard operating procedures. We also call those SOPs. Test your water resources. When we say test your water resources, if you happen to be in an urban area or you're using municipal water, you will have to acquire that information from your city organization at the beginning of your season. And create a traceability system. Those are your harvest logs. And we have lot numbers here. A lot of folks maybe not using lot numbers. You may be using barcodes, but you should have a system of the means of harvesting, where you are harvesting from, what you are harvesting, and that should be identified. Some folks, like I said, you use a lot system. So maybe you start off at the beginning of your farming area and you number things from 1 to however many rows that you have. That allows for when your product goes to market, if there is any difficulty or there has been any contamination or an illness, it makes it easily to go back to your farm and be able to trace it. I have another slide in a little bit that'll give you more information about traceability. But once you have your food safety training, it is helpful to start developing your plan. And in essence of that, in a food safety plan, you record your risk assessment, the procedures you use to reduce the risk, and how you will record these procedures. There are more resources online. And if you go to our website, and we'll plan to give you that information at the end, there's a toolkit with a few templates and things that you will be able to work from. But always talk to your food safety counterparts Crystal is a chef, which helps very much if to have a chef also be with food safety. So you can talk things out and discuss some of the new rules and things that are coming down, and just discuss the common sensibility of some of the things that we're learning. So always have some food safety people that you have in your corner that you can talk to. Visit farms and facilities with food safety programs already in place. That way you get an idea of what they are, how they're writing them, how you need to look at your business and how you need to set things up so that your standard operating procedures are readable and able to be understood by your workers, your volunteers, and even the guests who come and meet you on your farm.
So food safety is everyone's responsibility. As Kimberly mentioned, it's important that everyone who comes on your farm is knowledgeable, whether they're there for a day or a whole season or for years. So you want to make sure you have something in place for your visitors, a visitor log. This policy that you're seeing on screen, it can be like verbatim used as a food policy, food safety policy that you can place on various locations that are very visible throughout your farm. Let people know how serious you are about growing produce that is free of contamination, and not just microbial contamination, but physical contamination as well. Go ahead. Okay. So
what should I do when it comes to writing your food safety plan for your farm? There are many templates online, and as you can see, Chesapeake Ag Innovation Center provides one-on-one coaching for free. So start keeping your records and your logs to document your practices. Then we are available as a team to come out and assess things for you. We actually do a walkthrough of your farm and do a risk assessment and find any risk that you have on your farm. Then we sit down with you and go over any standard operating procedures that are required based on your farm's operation. And then finally, writing a food safety plan based on the operation that you have currently and what you are in need of. Now you see on the other side, it says GAP food safety. The general grower information is listed here. What are you going to do? And how you are going to do it. Once you have the food safety training, it's helpful to start by developing the plan and having other plans to look at so that you can coordinate and look at those and see if it is if it's going to work for you. When you are writing this, make sure you have someone else read over it so that they can so that you have assurance that it is something that can be followed and that it makes sense and that the procedures that you have written are actually step by step and there's nothing that is left out. A lot of times when we write things ourselves, it is more or less, we have it in our head. So there's pieces that may be missing. So always make sure that someone else is reading over the information that you are providing to support the functionality of your farm and how things are run. Record keeping, even though it said that it wasn't as extensive for PSR, record keeping for any business, especially farming, because we're selling, we're sometimes giving away, and we're also consuming. So record keeping is very, very valuable, and keeping logs of what's happening, illnesses, if someone gets hurt, the cleaning of your equipment, the cleaning of supplies, your harvesting, everything that you do on your farm really needs documentation, because if you're ever asked about certain things, it is pretty much known whether or not you just made it up right then and there, or rather you have a plan that is already in place and things are flowing the way they need to on your farm. What do I? Wait, we're on the wrong one. Where are you? Excuse me 1 second. Okay. What should I do? The first thing, of course, as I said earlier, you want to train your personnel But training your workers also also means you need tools. So you can't just train them on site. Well, you can. A lot of people do. We do that instant training right on site, and you expect them to know and remember everything that you've said and what you are talking about. In all honesty, it is important to make sure that your workers, once you have trained them, that they are retaining that information. We have quite a few examples here of places where you can go and download that information. But you always want to make sure that your workers are able to understand what it is that you're asking them to do. You want to, if you have multiple languages, then maybe you want to use photos or pictures and things in order for people to understand their training procedure. You may want to do videos during COVID because I could no longer do one-on-one training for anyone coming to the farm. We had 5-minute videos that they were able to watch to understand what it is we do on the farm, why we do it, and to show them a process of how it's done. So when they arrived on the farm for their first day, whether it was a tour or to work, they already knew that I was going to ask them to wash their hands. Whether they had been working, I don't know what they were doing before they got there. So it was important for them to know that that is a part of the procedure when you're working on the particular urban farm that you were coming to. So you see Cornell Co-op Extension's food safety training videos. We have Penn State here and California, Carolina Farm Steward Association. You can take a picture of this slide. The photo that you see on the side, there is a video that is given out to most folks who take any grower training programs with Future Harvest. I'm sorry, not Future Harvest, with food safety or with Department of Agriculture. That video is given to you. There is a flip chart. The second picture you see, this is food safety field training kit for fresh produce handlers. That is a flip chart that will be given to you, and you are able to actually show your workers on one screen, on one sheet, that has the pictures for them, and then the other side that you'll be reading has all of the directions. So it's an easy to use flip chart that you can use when you're training your employees, when you have visitors on your farm, or even guests who are coming just to take a tour. What should I do first? Make it as easy as possible to do the right thing. You'll notice on the top, the first 3 pictures on our screen, there is, this is the oldest Black farm in Baltimore. That's the Greener Garden Urban Farm. And we had a incident there a few weeks ago where the pipes burst. So Crystal and I went over to help with the harvest there. And you see the alternative way, because they do have a wash station, a beautiful wash house, but when the pipes burst, we had to do it outside. So this was our makeshift harvesting and how we operated for that day for them to be able to get their produce to market for Friday into Saturday. You'll notice there is a wash station in the bottom. That is something that every farm should have. And if you have a field with a wash station a mile away, or even a half a mile away, that's too far. You could not expect your workers to come out of the field and walk a mile in order to wash their hands and do different things. So please, if you make multiple wash stations, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy, it can cost under $30. But it is very important to have water running and a spigot that's open, that's able to be open and left open while the hands are being washed. You need soap, as well as paper towels and a trash can with a lid on it so that the papers do not fly all over. You'll notice here have all of the knives that they use for harvesting. And those, once they are cleaned, they are hung up in one area. So that's to let you know you should always be organized. Store your gloves and the first aid kit in a plain sight. Set up hand washing facilities where you need them, but also accessible to your workers on the field. And place logs in convenient places where you can reach for them easily. Install sale and convenient places to store your equipment. make sure that if your workers are out in the field and they have to keep running back and forth to your pack house, make it convenient for them for the tools and things that they need. It helps to keep things much more organized, but it also helps you and your farm knowing that everyone has what they need and it's where it needs to be. But it also helps at the end of the day when it comes to cleaning up things and putting things back where they belong. If everything is back in the right order, then everyone can find it for the next shift that comes on.
Okay, so what should I do? Traceability and recall. So it's important when you're selling to a wholesale customer to be able to trace your product back to your farm. So in Baltimore, we have the Farm Alliance of Baltimore that is a collective of about 17 urban farms. And on Saturdays, they bring together all of their produce. So Friday for Saturday, all of their produce is going to be sold. And it's important to know where that romaine lettuce came from. Was it from the Greener Garden, or was it from White Rock Community Farm? So in order for the customers as well as the staff who is selling that produce, because it's sometimes every week is someone different, like it's a different farmer that rotates at the farm stand. And then usually there's a staff person as well. But it's important to know where that lettuce came from, which farm. And in order to figure out, sometimes the same head of lettuce looks exactly the same. Sometimes as a chef, I can look at like a head of, look at some kale and I know which farm it came from. But like you can't always do that easily. So you want to make sure you have on there your name, the name of your farm. You want to have the address of your farm. You also want to have the weight. So if you're selling in half pound or pounds, whatever that is, the weight of your produce, of course, what the produce is, you want on the label as well. And then you want to have a lot number. You want to know exactly where you got that produce from in the field. So if it was row A, section B, then that needs to be on there as well. So a lot of people use different systems. So you need to find which one is best for you for doing a lot system. Sometimes people put the dates inside of their lot number system so they know exactly when it was harvested. Some people even put the time of day so they know if it was harvested in the morning or afternoon, and that kind of lets them know what shift might have harvested it as well. But you want to make sure that you have some type of label and or like barcodes that can be scanned, a little more techy, but that will also give you all of the information. So if you're using barcodes in a scan, it still has to give the address, the location in general, and the name of that produce. And sometimes your customers might have specific requirements as well. So you want to find out what they require, whether they want to say tomatoes, or if they want it to say romaine aroma tomatoes, or if they wanted to say butterleaf lettuce, or if it's okay if it just says lettuce. So you want to make sure you have everything that your customer wants as well, in addition to what you already should have.
Keep in mind that tracking system is helping you as well, because if your farm is nice and organized, then hopefully when your folks come in that are going to harvest for you that day, you've already assigned them and let them know you're going to be in row 1 through row 5, and this is where you're harvesting, because you know where that produce that's being harvested is coming from. So that should be something that is more or less planned out before you start to do your harvest for that day.
So will it cost me in time and money? So someone has to do the work. So when you're getting a food assessment done, if you're like writing your food safety plan, you want to make sure you're doing it yourself. You can pay someone to help you, and that's fine, but you want to be part of that process, whether you bring in a consultant or not. You don't want to leave it to a team member to write out all of that for you and depend on someone else. Then you can have the team member with you, and actually it's even beneficial to have, like if you're an owner, have the manager, have your field supervisors be part of that process, because sometimes they know what's going on more than you do if you're not in the field every day yourself. So you can also outsource the management and implementation, but really you as the main shareholder, the main stakeholder in your operation. You want to be there. You can also pay for third-party audit, and that will vary. So like in size and complexity, Kimberly went over, the different auditors and different companies that you can use. And an audit can cost anywhere from $550 on up to thousands of dollars for a small and mid-sized operation. And it can cost quite a bit more if you have a larger operation. And also ask about cost sharing if you are doing third-party audits. That might be a possibility as well.
Okay, we talked earlier about GAP certification, which again is good agricultural practices versus, well, before it was produce safety rule. Now we're talking about Food Safety Modernization Act for the produce safety rule. As I said before, it's industry driven. And it relates to the access to markets. And it's a business decision for you as an owner or an operator of your farm. Again, access to markets, that has to do with if you're selling to Whole Foods, Costco, any of the major markets. Remember, you have a different jurisdiction or different group of guidelines that you have to follow in comparison to being at a farmer's market. Supermarkets and different chains, they have their own rules and regulations. So that's why the good agricultural practices certification comes in regards to that. You'll notice that the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration regulations, requires for farmers to be covered by law. So again, the produce safety rule is a law, okay? When it comes to GAP, there are a few differences that you can see here. We're just going to go over a couple of them just to keep you kind of straight on it. But when it comes to technical assistance and coaching, it varies in cost and availability in each region. We're talking about for produce safety rules. It's free, non-regulatory on-farm readiness reviews, which are available. Now, there are a couple of things that we have here that are similar on both sides, as for good agricultural practices, as well as the produce safety rule. They are the worker training, at least annual training appropriate for their role and training records required. So every time someone is trained on your farm, there should be a log of that training, when it was done, and that worker should be able to sign off, including a date. Again, don't try to do these things just before someone is coming to visit you, because they can tell a difference. They do know when you just put that information in for the occasion of them coming. You are required to keep records of applications of raw manure or of compost containing raw manure that does not have scientifically valid treatment. The recommendations follow the organic standards. 120 to 90 day interval between application and harvest. So most of you are familiar with 90 to 120 days when you are putting down your manure, and that time frame that you allow it to sit before you ever harvest. So that's what they're talking about there with the 90 to 120 day rule. Compost containing manure. You're required to keep records of scientifically valid compost treatments if you make your own. Compost you purchase requires to get a certification from the manufacturer or the person who you're purchasing it from. That is an assurance or a compliance letter that you will receive from them in regards to your compost. You'll notice the next statement here says, requires written traceability and recall programs with records. Crystal just explained to you the labels that you need to have on your produce. That label should also include the name of your farm, the address of your farm, a contact number, and the general information that is about your farm. It would be helpful to know exactly what the name of the produce is. How many, if it's a half a pound, that should also be on your label, as well as the row and the location of where it came from on your farm. So it is extremely important to help out your workers to make sure that that lot system or that number system, that traceability is something that's easy to flow and not something that causes you to have to run all over the whole entire farm to figure out the chronological order of the way things are operating on the farm. You have the recommended measures for traceability for produce safety rules. Qualified exempt farms have a labeling requirement. For GAP, good agricultural practices, there are no financial records required. But you will notice for produce safety, for exempt and qualified exempt farms, records of annual sales to support your status. Another difference you'll see is requires an annual third-party audit annually. Most audits have a fee to be paid by the farmer. Multiple certified bodies to choose from, but the buyer has the preference. When it comes to produce safety rules, the State Department of Agriculture, the Health Department, or the Federal Department of Agriculture inspection agencies and schedule difference in each state, although it's free, so it doesn't cost the farmer. Good agricultural practices, GAP certified programs include most produce safety rule requirements. Good agricultural practices audit does not replace produce safety rule. Compliance with the rule and passing an inspection does not replace good agricultural practices, audit, or certification. So one does not replace the other. It depends on what it is that you are actually doing. If your buyers and your business requires a GAP certification, that is something that you as a business owner has made a decision to do based on who you would like to access your produce and based on the industry that you are geared towards. So you have to weigh the decisions and decide what it is that you're doing. But keep in mind, even if you're managing a farm, you have a board and you have workers, that this decision to make your farm to go with GAP, good agricultural practices, should be something that everyone is in agreement with and understands, because everyone's going to have to follow those new rules when they come down, not just the person who's running the farm or the person who's managing the farm. It has to be something that everyone adopts, the same as the produce safety rules. But your GAP certification, remember, that's an audit that you're paying for. So you really want to be on your P's and Q's and have things in accordance and the right records that you need, because that is something that is going to cost you per hour with the person who you're with. With us coming to, or not just us, but any group that comes to do produce safety rules with you, we are there to help you. We are there to help you move along with the growth of your business. We're not auditing. As a matter of fact, any information that we collect, you also have that information, and we'll leave that with you so that you can make the changes that are necessary for you to make. Why food safety? Why now? We don't control what comes from the outside. Antibiotic resistance, as you see on the slide, from the farm to the table. When antibiotics are given to animals, they are also coming through that animal to whatever you are eating from that livestock. The spread of from animal products, it can happen, as you can see, when you're washing the food. It can happen when you are cutting the food. So the knife in the process of cutting can also be because of the surface that it's on, there can also be contaminations. The exposures that you have can come from when you're eating it, but also when you saw the chicken just step on feces. That happens with the farmer as well. So if you are wearing your boots and you're walking around the field and you're stepping on deer poop, and then you decide to go inside of your hoop house to do some work, you've just contaminated that hoop house by bringing that outside livestock feces on your feet and into your produce area. The impact, of course, no one ever wants to make anyone sick, whether it's a mild illness or anything severe. But 1 in 5 resistant infections are caused by germs from food and animals. So keep in mind, as a farmer, you have a responsibility to your consumers, and you have a responsibility to your interns and your workers to let them know how important it is to be aware of their situation, where they're walking, changing their shoes, changing even their clothes if they have been exposed and they have things on their clothes and they can't go back into another area to do harvesting. We need to make sure that they are aware and that they are changing their clothing or that apron, their shoes, their gloves. That can keep everything from coming back to your farm and having you be identified with the problem. GAP certification reassures for wholesale buyers. We have a copy of the USDA information. If you'd like to take a picture of that, please do at this time, but this is just information that we're sharing in regards to good agricultural practices and the certification of it. What is GAP certification? It is a third-party auditor who comes and inspects your farming operation to see if they comply with food safety standards. Food safety standards are based on good agricultural practices. Again, GAP. Good agricultural practices, or GAP, are best practices and procedures for produce farms that may reduce the risk of foodborne illness, may be required by your buyer. It is a business decision of the farm. It is not a law.
If your customer tells you that they require GAP certification, ask questions. Is there a specific standard or audit program your customer requires? Do they require a preferred certification body or auditor? And do they require you to upload documentation to a supply chain management platform? If your customer isn't specific, you can decide which standard you want to follow and who you want to pay to audit your operation. So it's definitely a business decision. You can talk to your food safety peers, visit farms and facilities with food safety programs in place to get more information on what's the best for you and for your operation. So the timeline for GAP certification, it depends on the customer's requirements, the complexity and scale, training needs and availability, and food safety literacy. It's also dependent on the internal capacity of the farm, external use of consultants and contractors. And realistically, it can take at least 6 months to get GAP certified. So you don't want to wait until you find a buyer that actually wants GAP certification. If it's something you think you want to do, it's best to start the process even a year in advance so that if there are any issues that come up, you have an opportunity to fix it in time for that particular buyer. Okay. So how to implement a produce safety culture plan. There are several steps, but some of the easiest things to implement are SOPs, or standard operating procedures. And as you're getting started, if you're brand new to farming, documenting how you're doing everything as you're getting started. If you've been doing it for a while, documenting how things are going. If you're not doing certain processes and another worker is, have them help you write that SOP, because they are actually the ones hands-on in the ground doing whatever that activity is. So definitely get the staff involved in helping to write the SOPs, the templates as well, because they actually have to follow it and they know better like how to follow, like what their procedures are, and they can then like write it down. And then from there, you don't have to retrain everyone from scratch or come up with different ways. Once you have a standard operating procedure, you can train from that one document on how to do whatever that one process is. It makes training in the future so much easier. So sometimes it does take time up front to develop the SOPs, to develop the templates, to get the posters together. But once you have it, it makes time management easier in the future. It makes it easier to transfer operations. Let's say you don't feel like doing it anymore, you want to like take a break, or if you get ill or something happens, the operation of the farm can still happen. If you hire someone and they're doing, the special harvesting of something and no one else knows how to do that, and they leave for whatever reason, now you have to start from scratch. But if you have an SOP that is accessible, that everyone can understand, there are different types of SOPs. It doesn't have to be all written. You can do pictures, you can do video, just something that people understand what the operating procedure is. You want to have that ready just for, life happens. So just being ready for all of that. So also risk assessments. So that's something that our team provides at no cost. We will travel to your farm. If you're up and down the East Coast, we'll even go to Massachusetts and Maine and Vermont and New York. Like Kimberly was just in New York. So all over Delaware, Maryland, of course, Virginia, DC area. All of these areas, we are willing to go to the areas. And if we can't go in person, like even during COVID, we were able to do some of the risk assessments virtually. And people can actually, take the camera around and let us see what's, going on. But in person is better if possible. And then we can help with the food safety plan. So right after we do a risk assessment, like in person, then we can do the food safety plan in person or virtually. A lot of times we do it virtually because it takes a lot more time, and we just take a few hours whenever everyone's available to get that together. And with that food safety plan, you're actually getting your SOPs, you're getting your checklists, you're getting all of your templates done for you in an organized manner that you can do digitally or in a binder or both. And have that available to show your auditors, have it available to show anyone that you need to show that to. And this is good for your own personal record keeping. It helps you know what happened 2 or 3 years ago. If something happens on your farm again, you can go back and have a history of what's been happening on your farm, a history of everything. And then as you do the SOPs and you need to make changes, it's good to keep the old ones as you're making updates as well. So all of that is just like some of the beginning things you can do to implement. We have plenty of resources to help you. You don't have to start SOPs from scratch. You don't have to do any templates from scratch. We have a lot of resources to help you no matter what size your farm is.
And also you saw in there that we have posters. Those are printable posters. So if you utilize our services, when you receive the toolkit with all the information, you will find posters that you'll have on your farm that you can print out at your leisure, and you can put them up on your farm in all the places that they need to, and you can print out as many of them as you need instead of course, we don't make you purchase them, so you're not thinking about buying them. You can just print them out yourself.
Okay, so the produce, so we have the timeline for the produce safety rule. So we have a lot of new dates coming up and some new things that just happened just a couple of months ago in November. That's taking place next week on January 20th. And then we have compliance dates. So we have dates for when things are in effect. And then we have compliance dates of we actually have to follow it. So we give, like, there's given time frame for, like, once they say you have to do something, they don't say you have to do it the next day. They usually roll it out based on the size of your farm. So the larger farms are usually required to follow the rules a little faster than the smaller farms. And the compliance dates are based on a 3-year average of annual produce sales as shown in the table here. And we'll go over it a little more in detail and break out like the different compliance dates. But you see for the sprouts, all of the compliance dates have already come about. So whether you're a small farm or a large farm, you should be in compliance. But for the water related compliance dates, a lot of these changes recently occurred. So like if you're a large farmer, as of last year, you should have been ready. For small farms, you have until January 26th of this year to get in compliance. And for very small farms, you have another year to get in compliance, but you don't want to wait until the last minute. This is the time to work on making sure you are compliant and have everything in order so that if there are issues, you can fix it before the compliance date. All right, so upcoming regulation changes. So the FSMA traceability rule. So FSMA, like the traceability rule, requirements for additional traceability records for certain foods was published in the Federal Register on November 21st, 2022, so just a few months ago. And this FSMA rule establishes traceability record-keeping requirements for people who manufacture, process, pack, or hold foods included on the food traceability list. Traceability rule requirements for the 21 CFR 21 subpart S, FSMA section 204. So that's the whole thing, FSMA section 204. Like I said, the final rule published in November, but the compliance date for all entities is January 20th, 2026. So that's 3 years after the effective date of the final rule. And the effective date is January 20th, 2023, so next week. So what are the FDA Okay, so are you prepared for the FSMA Rule 204? So here's some of the things you need to know. What are you doing to prepare for compliance with the new requirements? And have you thought about how you can leverage traceability as a competitive advantage and brand differentiator? So companies who focus merely on compliance and on their single link in the supply chain are missing out on the opportunity to shape the future of food safety. Furthermore, they are exposing their company to potential risks such as reduced consumer trust and limited visibility into the supply chain that could hinder product quality and safety. So you should start thinking beyond compliance. So what is the FSMA Rule 204? In 2011, the Food Safety Modernization Act of FSMA was signed into law. And the section 204 of the rule, the Food Traceability Final Rule, establishes additional record keeping for entities on that food traceability list. So what is the food traceability list? So it's a list of foods that will be subject to additional record keeping requirements. It includes many fruits and vegetables like fresh cucumbers, herbs, leafy greens, melons, peppers, sprouts, tomatoes, tropical tree fruits, and all fresh cut fruits, and all fresh cut vegetables. It also includes a variety of soft cheeses, and shell eggs, nut butters, and some categories of seafood. So what are the FDA food traceability requirements? If you harvest, cool, pack, ship, process, manufacture, or receive any of the foods on the food traceability list, you are required to keep additional records on these items. The FDA has defined a set of metrics called key data elements, or you see it as key DEs, that correspond to different events in the supply chain called critical tracking events, CTEs. So we have all these like acronyms, you'll hear all types of things, but I want to say the full name as well. So CTEs, and the CTEs are the harvesting, cooling, the initial packing, the first land-based receiver, and that's for seafood only, shipping, receiving, and transformation. So to determine what key DEs you would need to record, you need to consult the FDA's resource guide on critical tracking events and key data elements. So they have a whole guide that has a lot more information on that. And depending on the details of your business operation, you may need to capture multiple sets of KDEs. So when you're creating a traceability plan, a new requirement in the final rule is the traceability plan that covers procedures you use to maintain your traceability records, including formal and location of your records, procedures you use to identify foods on the FTL that you manufacture, process, pack, or hold, and how you assign traceability of lot codes, point of contact for questions on your traceability plan and records. Additionally, those who grow or raise food on the FTL must include a farm map showing the areas where they grow and raise those foods. So the farm map needs to show the location and the name of each field or growing area, the geographic coordinates, and any other information needed to identify. So this is all new. So like I said, it goes into effect on January of this year, and the FDA will give companies a period of 3 years. So you will have until like January of 2026 to become fully compliant, but it is staggered based on how much you sell. So for the larger farmers, they have to become compliant faster than the smaller farmers. And so what can you do to prepare for the FSMA Rule 204? So there are 6 steps you can take now to prepare for the enforcement of this rule. So you want to identify any of your products that are on the food traceability list. Familiarize yourself with the critical tracking events and understand the key data elements you're required to capture and store based on your role in the supply chain. Ensure that these key steps are captured and stored in a way that's easily accessible. You want to talk to your supply chain partners about what they're doing to prepare for Rule 204 compliance, and harmonize your labels across all suppliers and consider using labels that align with PTI standards to make it easier to get the information you need from suppliers. And then start vetting traceability solutions now, keeping in mind what features you will need and which solutions offer that. And although the FDA permits paper records, many companies will turn to technology to help them meet the FSMA Rule 204 requirements. So if you're considering using a digital traceability solution, look at a platform that automates the KDE collection and stores the data securely so you can access it as needed. So now we also have the subpart E. So I know that FSMA traceability rule, there was a lot of information. It's all really new. Even as late as yesterday, I was checking out some things and they just updated some things yesterday. So it's always more information you want to keep, track of. And as you keep track of this, it makes you more competitive in the market when you have all of these things in place. So I know it's a lot, but just take it in steps. We are here to assist you as well. So subpart E, also very recently added, and this is about agricultural water for harvest and post-harvest requirements. So it's not the pre-harvest agricultural water, we're talking about the harvest water and the post-harvest requirements. So the intended enforcement discretion period for the harvest and post-harvest agricultural water provisions for covered produce, other than sprouts in the produce safety rule, ends on January 26, 2023, so next week, for all businesses other than small and very small businesses. To help prepare growers, the FDA has released a fact sheet with questions and answers on the requirements. And so just basically starting for the small businesses by January 26, 2023, you should be ready to follow all of the requirements. For small businesses, it's 2024, and for very small businesses, it's 2025. So I'm sorry, for very small, 2025, for small businesses, 2024, and for all businesses, 2023, or all other businesses, I should say. So the fact sheet is intended to highlight the requirements for agricultural water use for harvest and post-harvest activities under the PSR. So think like we pretty much know what the agricultural water is, so I won't go into that in too much detail here. Okay, so produce safety education and consulting. So if you're confused about the good agricultural practices, the produce safety rule, the FSMA, the food, which is the Produce Safety Modernization Act, we can help you. We offer free gap-aligned produce safety workshops, as well as consultations to farms in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We do on-farm risk assessments, as I mentioned earlier, as well as one-on-one coaching. And we have a lot of preventive controls as well. So definitely feel free to connect with us. You can do a screenshot of this. And we have the produce safety toolkits and resources. So you can just go to caic.org/food-safety to get more information and resources. With the toolkits include a lot of the SOPs and templates that we talked about, as well as checklists and posters that you can print and use, that you can download and do digitally as well for some of your, some people like to keep everything digital, so you can do that as well. And yeah, so we're under the Chesapeake Agriculture Innovation Center now. We were under another organization before, so you might hear some changes. And we are part of the Chesapeake Produce Safety Education Project. So I think that is a lot of what we needed to talk about, and we can open it up for questions at this time. So if you have any questions, comments, definitely feel free to jump in. So I'll leave this up for just one more moment if you want to do a screenshot or take a picture of this, and then I'm going to take the screen down and we can have a conversation.
Now make sure that you understand these templates and that you'll find in the toolkit, you are going to customize, or we'll do it with you. That's actually what we help you do, but we'll customize them according to your farm. So when you look at a template, even if you pull one up off of the internet, when you see that template, it doesn't mean that it has to stay exactly like it is. You need to rearrange it the way that it flows for you and your operation. Always, as we said before, make sure that your workers, if you have a right hand on your farm or right and a left hand, make sure they read over everything and it makes sense to them. Because it makes sense to you does not mean that everybody else who reads it are going to understand it. You want to make sure that your volunteers understand it. You want it to be understandable from young people as well as your older audience and any guests who may come to your farm.
Okay, so I'm looking at the chat now. I don't see any questions in the chat, or unless I'm missing it. Okay, so or the Q&A section for the online folks. But if you have any questions, you can definitely, you can raise your hand as well for the people online, and we can call on you if you want to. I see Tania or Tania.
Before,
So,
before you go into questions and answers, we do have one in the room. Tanya,
yes.
Hand up, but I wanted to add, Kimberly, you had a question about the extension office here in Massachusetts.
Yes.
The University of Massachusetts at Amherst, which is Western Mass. They have several field offices throughout the state. You could go to ag.umass.edu to find out all the state offices. And you can also see me before you leave. I do have a list here. But that would be our extension office in the state of Massachusetts. We're also joined by the Farm Service Agency in-house right now, and they can also provide information. So I wanted to get that information out.
So with Farm Service Agency, producers should know that they can get some of their costs back for doing food safety certification, for the food safety certification for specialty crops program.
Okay.
So they can see their local Farm Service Agency offices. They're all over the country, and they're in each county, and they can get up to 75% of many of the costs back. They can get paid up to five of their microbiological tests. They can get those costs back. So it's a new program that has come out in the fall, and you can sign up for 2022 costs until January 31st. But then you have until next year to sign up for 2023 costs. Okay. So know that some of those costs can be reimbursed to farmers.
Awesome. That's an
Thank
excellent
you.
resource.
Thank you. So we're going to start with our first question here, and then we'll take Tanya online. Go right ahead, sir.
Hey there, guys. So I'll make sure you can hear me. My name is Brad. I'm with World Farmers. So we have like a World Farmers Kitchen, right, where we have a lot of farmers who farm on the land that we have. We're a nonprofit that like leases out land to local farmers, like refugee farmers or farmers from like all over the world. And then they come to our kitchen to process their food, whether it's like cut and peeled squash or cut and frozen kale. Like we do all these kinds of things. So with the risk assessment, would you guys be able also to come to the kitchen and to like go over the kitchen with us too, to make sure our SOPs are up to date and everything there, or is it just farm operations you do?
Nope, we could do that as well. And Lindsay's sitting one person away from you. She's the head of our team. So you want to connect with her and she can definitely tell you that part of the operation. But yes, we do SOPs and help you set up everything from your cool pack station, your warehouse, your bathroom, even if you need to teach people how to wash their hands.
Oh, he's talking about
So,
the kitchen.
but he has another operation, but we could teach you and show you what you need there. And even in your kitchen, what your SOPs could look like, should look like, so that they're accessible and readable for everyone.
All right. Tanya, you have your hand raised. Go ahead. And everyone else that's online, you can use the chat feature to put your question in, but go ahead, Tanya.
Thank you. And thanks. This was so informative and really interesting. I really appreciate how clear you all were, and it was great. So I know that the food safety rules are really focused on, sort of disease and bacteria, and that's all of that. But I'm curious if there's like overlap with the compost regulations and certifications and rules as well, with concern around PFAS and human health. Like, is there any talk about sort of intersection between food safety and PFAS contamination in soils? Do you know?
I don't know offhand. As we said, anytime you're using with your compost, there should be a certain time frame similar to that 90-120 rule for putting your compost into the field, especially when you're about to harvest. Those are the only rules that I am familiar with at this point. But what we could do, if you can share your information with us, we would like to be able to answer that fully for you, as well as the entire question. So if you could, Tanya, write that down and put it in our chat, or so that we can see that question and be able to get it back, get you an answer right back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's that, Tanya, that right now, the food safety GAP certification and produce safety rules do not address that particular contaminant. The USDA and FDA are very cautious about taking on anything that might be controversial in the industry, which is a great thing. Organic certification may address it, but food safety in this country does not. It may well do so in other parts of the world where they're more concerned about sustainable farming and food safety.
In the last few minutes that we have in this wonderful workshop that was very informative, are there any more questions from the room on the floor right now? Yes, go right ahead.
If I email you guys, is it possible I can get a copy of this presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Some of the forms just for business.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. So yeah,
Yes.
definitely. I'm about to write down.
And are there any questions online from our viewing audience at home? And please use the chat feature as well. And you can take yourselves off of mute. All right. Well, if there are no additional questions, I leave the last, are there any parting words for us, Crystal and Kimberly, that you'd like to leave us with?
First, I'd like to thank you all for being here. And thank you for even paying attention to the produce safety rules, or even having safety in your mind when you're on your farm. Remember and keep in mind that produce safety also includes the safety of yourself as a farm worker, as well as the other folks that are on your farm working with you. So it's an all around safety as well as your produce safety.
Yeah, thank you all so much for accommodating us and letting us be part of this conference. Hopefully next time we can be there in person and get to see all of your faces and join you all. But yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope you were able to take away some beneficial information. And yeah, that's it. So
Thank
have
you.
a great weekend. Thank you all. Thank you, Sister Anna.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Yes.